everyone, it's Caitlin from WOOLJEWEL Podcast, and I am so excited to be announcing my very first knit along, co-hosted with Tayler from Wool Needles Hands and Celeste from Yarn to Table. So this knit along is going to be the Great Unravel 2017. I'm going to tell you a little bit what it's about, and then I'm going to go through all the rules. So the idea is to take a thrifted knitted item, ideally a sweater, and we're going to unravel all together, and then we're going to cast on a new project with the upcycled yarn that you harvested from your thrifted sweater. So there are a few rules. You need to go out and get yourself a thrifted sweater, and I'm going to talk about exactly what you need to look for in your thrifted sweater so that you have a good experience doing this, because there are lots of things that can go wrong with unraveling a thrifted item or like a commercial sweater that you found. So I'm going to go over what to look for after I go through the rules. You're going to get your sweater, it's going to be perfect, and you're going to unravel it, and then we're going to cast on Earth Day or after Earth Day. So April 22nd is Earth Day, so you have about a month to find yourself a sweater or knit item to unravel and prepare the yarn. So that's going to be unraveling and washing, and if you want to, you can skein it up or ball it up so that you can knit with it. Be sure to take a picture of it before you unravel, because the before and after is going to be part of your entry to win a prize for the knit along. So we need to see what the yarn came from. You need to unravel a minimum of 100 grams. So that's gonna be really easy to do if you find yourself a sweater, and ideally it's gonna be a sweater. I guess a hat is technically 100 grams, but I don't really see the point in unraveling a hat's worth of yarn and then knitting with it. Part of the fun of unraveling a sweater is having lots of yarn to use for whatever you want afterwards. So if you're gonna go through the trouble of unraveling a thing to get yarn for really cheap and to recycle it and upcycle it, then you might as well do it so that you have a lot of yarn and you can pretty much make whatever you want out of it. Okay, so 100 grams minimum. You don't necessarily have to use all of the yarn in your knitted item. So like if I unravel 700 grams of yarn, I'm not expecting you to knit up all 700 grams for your F.O., but the F.O. does need to be 100% upcycled yarn. So we're not allowing projects that are upcycled yarn mixed with stash yarn or store-bought yarn. This is going to be all recycled. This is a knit along, so we'd like everybody to try to knit an item from the recycled yarn. I know that sometimes if you unravel the sweater, you find that maybe the sweater you chose does not have the ideal type of yarn for knitting. So if you give it an honest try knitting and you just find that it's impossible and like totally not even worth it, then go ahead and figure out another use for the yarn. Make a garland, make a weaving, I don't know, figure something out. Be creative, and as long as it's finished, if you can consider it a finished object, then you can enter it. We just ask that you give it an honest try knitting first, because this is a knit along. So to enter, you need a few things. You need a before and after picture. You need to make sure that it is 100% made out of recycled yarn, and you need to have it actually be finished. It has to be an actual F.O., so no WIPs are going to be considered. So we're gonna have 2 months after the cast on date of Earth Day, April 22nd, before we close the threads. So the cool thing about this knit along being co-hosted is that each one of us is going to have a separate F.O. thread to enter. So you can enter into all 3 F.O. threads to win. So you'll get 3 chances to win. So all we ask is that you subscribe to all 3 of our podcasts, and if you want to enter into a thread, you need to be a member of that podcast group. So if you want to enter all 3, then you need to join all 3 Ravelry groups for the podcast. Yeah, so I think that's about it for actual rules. So I'm just going to get into a few things to look for when you're shopping for your thrifted sweater. I'm just gonna say sweater. It doesn't have to be a sweater, but I'm just gonna keep saying sweater because I think it's the ideal thing to choose when you're shopping. Okay, so when you're shopping for a sweater with the intention of unraveling it, there's a few things you wanna look for. So some things are things that are absolute musts, and other things are other things are elements that are just gonna make your life easier when unraveling. I've got 3 sweaters here that I'm gonna show you, and I'm gonna talk about the pros and the cons of each sweater because they're all a little different. Okay, so the first sweater I'm gonna show you is this guy. A few good things about this sweater. The fiber is good. It's mostly silk. It has a little bit of acrylic, but not enough that it's gonna make me worried that it's going to not be able to get the crimps out. Another good thing about it, and this is one of the musts, okay? This is the most important thing to look for when you are choosing a sweater to unravel. The seams. So take a look at the seams. This sweater has 2 types of seams, okay? It's got a seam like this. This is the type of seam that you want. It is the type of seam that you would have if you had hand knit a sweater. So you can see the edge of each row, and this is what it looks like from the outside. It's a basically knitted seam, okay? The type of seam that you do not want, and this is a good example because this sweater has both. So here's the type of seam that you don't want. You can tell that the knitted fabric had just been cut and sewn into place, okay? One thing that's crucial, this sweater actually, even though it has the bad seam, it actually would be good for unraveling because the bad seam is where you would normally have a cast on or a bind off edge. So the bad seams are running horizontally across the knitted fabric, and the good seams are vertical. I hope that makes sense. So if it's like this, if the bad seam were like this, then each row would be a completely separate strand of yarn. But since this sweater has the bad type of seam running horizontally across the knitted fabric, this would be okay because all of the yarn above and below it would be one strand because it's all one piece. You just don't want to get one that's a bad seam running vertically with the knitted fabric. Really hope that makes sense. If it helps, I can take pictures and maybe post them in the group thread. So another con that this sweater has, besides the bad seams, and actually in this case the bad seams are good because of the way that they run on the fabric. But one thing that is not so great about this sweater is this color work. The cat is knitted on, and the cat is intarsia. So I'm going to show it inside out. Okay, so every row is going to have different little chunks of yarn wherever this cat is. So that's not so great. That's like not an absolute must. That is just, it's going to make your life more difficult. So if you find something with intarsia, make sure that it's only if it's small, or make sure that it's only kind of in one section of the sweater, because if you have intarsia, like polka dots or something all over, it's just not going to be fun. You're going to have a bunch of tiny balls of yarn and you're not going to get one big one, and that's what we want, just to make life easier. So the back of the sweater is actually great. This sweater, another pro is that it's super simple construction. So if you ignore the cat, you can see that the sleeve and the body are all one piece. There are fewer seams, which is really good because that means I'm going to get one gigantic ball of yarn. If you have the normal sections, a sweater has a front, back, and 2 sleeves, that's also really great. So don't worry too much about that. You just don't want weird seams all over the place because you're just gonna end up with a bunch of small things of yarn. It's just more work. The last thing I wanna mention about this sweater is that the gauge is a bit small. It's a bit of a finer gauge. I wouldn't actually unravel the sweater, that being the primary reason, because this is yarn that is very thin and I wouldn't want to knit with it. But I hope that gives you an idea of some of the things to look for. Okay, so the second sweater I'm going to show you, this guy. Okay, lots of cables. Simpler on the back. I think this is actually brioche. Some of the things that are good about it are the gauge. I like this a little bit chunkier yarn. That's about where the good things end because this is 92% acrylic, so I feel like it wouldn't, it just would hold a crimp. It wouldn't be that fun to knit with afterwards. And the absolute worst thing about this is that the seams are all bad seams. I got this at Urban Outfitters. It was probably very cheaply made. So all of the knitted fabric has this seam that looks like it's been done by a sewing machine. So if it looks like it's been done by a sewing machine, it's not usable. This is crucial. It's not something that's just gonna make your life easier to get the right kind of seam. You must have the right type of seam, and that is because if it's a knitted seam, then the yarn continues from row to row as one strand. If it looks like one of these, that means that the yarn has been cut, and so each row is one separate strand of yarn, and it's gonna be impossible to knit with. Okay, the last sweater I'm gonna show you is one that I actually have unraveled before. It's just I have a second one. So if you saw the episode where I talked about my outer space sweater, the short row section around the yoke was made from upcycled yarn from an Anthropologie sweater. And I actually liked the sweater itself, so I bought one to wear and I bought another one to unravel and knit into another sweater. Okay, so here it is. It's kind of a goofy sweater. My husband always makes fun of me for it. Okay. So it's kind of a shrug sweater with a giant like shawl scarf thing attached to it. Okay. Since I have unraveled this exact sweater before, I'm gonna get more in depth about what my experience was like. I knew right when I picked it up it was gonna be fine because it has these knitted seams, like a big chunky knitted seam. It was not done by a sewing machine. And it has relatively simple construction. It's got a back panel, it has 2 sleeves, and the real reason I wanted to unravel this is because of this super, super long shawl scarf thing that's attached to the front of it. Because I knew that would just be a lot of yarn that I could ball up and use for whatever, and I do have a ton of it. This gave me a lot of yarn. The thing that made my life most difficult was this embellishment. This is actually one piece of yarn, all these little baubles. It's one yarn that was woven in and out of the knitted fabric. So that actually complicated things quite a bit. Every time I got to a row where these were woven in, it would get very tangled and it was very difficult to unravel. I sucked it up and I actually got through it, but it just wasn't that fun to do. So if you're shopping around and you see something that has a lot of this stuff, like a lot of buttons or a lot of stuff woven in and out, maybe give it a pass. It's not undoable, it just made my life harder. It was just really annoying to deal with. But now I've got this novelty yarn and I have the normal yarn, so I'm, in the end I'm glad I did it. But if you're looking for something really easy to unravel, you don't want to get something that's heavily embellished. Just some other tips for choosing a sweater. Look for a large size, something larger than what you would normally wear, because you're going to get more yarn out of it. It might be a little bit more work to unravel, but as you're unraveling, if you accidentally break the yarn or like something happens, you want to have more than enough to work with for whatever project you're gonna end up making. Another tip is to triple check for holes or any kind of damage. If there's a rip, if it's like running the wrong way down the fabric, then that means that you're not gonna get that continuous strand of yarn. So double check for that kind of thing. You could also look for something that would be easy to dye. Like if it's the perfect sweater to unravel and the only thing you don't like is the color, then get it anyway and just go get some dye from the craft shop and dye it up. That could be really fun. Okay, so let's say you've gone to the thrift store, you've chosen your sweater to unravel, and you get home. What do? Find an edge and just start unraveling. The first row might be a little bit difficult because sometimes commercial sweaters will have a special edge attached to them. You can just cut that off if you want to. Again, always make sure if you're gonna have to cut something, cut it horizontally across the V's in your knit and not vertically. I had to do quite a bit of cutting with this guy because there was like a special edge attached to it, but once you get past it, you should be able to just rip it out like any other knit fabric. Okay, so wind it up, don't like stretch it out too much. All the kinks will come out when you wash it, which is the next thing. Figure out what type of fiber it is and wash it appropriately. You can wash it according to whatever instructions are on the tag that are inside the sweater, or if it's a wool sweater, obviously just soak it in some wool wash for a while. Obviously, when you're unraveling, it might take a little bit of extra time to wash because as you're unraveling, it's easiest to just roll it up into a ball, but then to wash it, you're gonna want it all spread out. So if you have a Swift, you could potentially just unravel the sweater directly onto your Swift, and then it'll already be ready to wash. Just wash it like you would any other yarn. Make sure you tie it in a few places so that it doesn't get tangled. Put the loose yarn, let it soak, wash it however you're supposed to wash it for that fiber, and then just let it dry. And then you can wind it up and get it ready to knit, and then we're gonna cast on in April. So I know that I've probably just thrown a lot of information at you, but even still, I probably missed a few things or just totally forgot to mention a few things. So please reach out to me if you have any questions. I've been trying to answer every single person that's been commenting in the Ravelry group. I'm gonna start a new thread specifically for questions about this knit along and any kind of unraveling questions that you have. So hop over there, it's Wool Jewel Podcast. Wool Jewel is one word. And let me know if you found your sweater, or let me know if you just need help with something. I'm happy to help out. I think this is gonna be a really fun knit along. You can also find me on Instagram as WOOLJEWEL. I'm super active on Instagram, so just send me a message or tag me or whatever, and I would love to help you out. I think this is gonna be so fun. Also, if you find your sweater and you've unraveled it and you're ready to go and you just don't know what to make with your yarn, post it in the group. Let's get some ideas. I would love to like have everybody be chatting about what we can do with the yarn. I haven't found my sweater for this project yet, so I'm gonna go shopping and hopefully I'll be able to get some photos or some video of what I've chosen, and I'm gonna totally go through all of this with you. The key thing is be sure to take a before picture before you unravel it, unravel it, because it's gonna be part of your finished object entry. We need to see the before and the after. So yeah, I think this is gonna be really fun. Definitely get in touch with me if you have any questions, no matter how big or small. Yeah, I think that's about it. Just make sure to let me know if I forgot anything, and I'll see you guys soon.